Hi, I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to a new year and a new series of Straight Talk, even with some new panellists, but unfortunately the same cis, white, stale, pale male as your host. You're welcome. Tonight the panel will share their ratings for the new government since it took office late last year. We'll discuss the demise of Newshub, the reasons and the implications for media in general. There's an interesting poll on the public's view of media bias. And is the Christchurch call losing its way? And if we have time, we may take a quick look at the public poll by Talbot Mills. It gives some interesting results on transgender policies in New Zealand, amongst other things. But without further ado, let's introduce the panel for tonight. Another fantastic looking lineup, and you'll probably spot a few new faces there. But firstly, well, I won't say we'll deal with the old ones, but Bruce, lovely to have you back. How are you?
I'm fine and nice to be back.
And a beautiful day in the back behind you, Christchurch, isn't it, in your study?
Yeah, it was a lovely day today, yes.
Okay, and trying to impress us with the number of books he can read is Ashley Church. Nice to have you back, Ashley, from Esk Valley.
Thanks, Bob. Nice to be back.
Okay, and Dr. Ate Mawala from Wellington. How are you this evening?
Malolele, very good. Thank you, Bob. It's good to be back.
Okay, and we get the new guys off the bench, kind of our special runners. Firstly, ex-National MP and looking really relaxed is Simon O'Connor. Simon, how are you?
I'm very well. I'd like to say I've lost a few kgs as well, but the camera might not be doing that tonight.
Okay, and the other one is Peter Williams coming to us live from somewhere in the back blocks of Wanaka, is it, Peter?
Central Otago, actually, Bob.
Okay.
The area is known
Close
as
enough.
Bendigo, between Cromwell and Terrace, home to that airport that was going to happen until last week.
Well done. And the interesting thing is that I'm glad you've shown up, Peter, because last time you were supposed to be the MC when I spoke in Wanaka on the whole RSE program, and your car broke down. I actually think you wanted to stay home and just watch the news. Is that correct?
I'll tell you another terrible story by sheer coincidence, Bob. That same blinking truck, which is a 2014 Holden Colorado, has failed to start again, and it's currently being towed to the doctor because it's got an alternator belt which is snapped. So heaven knows when I'll get that back and how much it'll cost. So anyway, it's a very unreliable car which might be headed for the sale yards very soon.
Do you know what the carbon footprint of that car is? It's just shocking, Peter. I'm
horrendous,
amazed.
Absolutely horrendous.
Okay, our image for today. It's our word of the week, and our word of the week is linear TV, because I don't think anybody's actually heard of it ever before. It's been talked about all week. It's a traditional broadcast television system delivered over the air. The viewer can only watch the program if they basically stop what they're doing and sit down and watch the broadcast programming schedule. So to watch your favourite TV content, you've got to tune into the TV channel at the time it's scheduled. So sitting down for the 6 p.m. news or sitting down at midday on a Sunday to watch Match of the Day, as I did as a younger person. OTT, short for over-the-top television, is the alternative, and it's all the diverse media formats that are springing up and adopting a live streaming format, and that means that you can access it any time. And actually the one thing I really like about it is the fact that you don't have to watch the whole program. You can skip through the ads, and if you're watching the news stories, you don't have to watch the ones you don't like that are boring or are fake news. So often I find I'm just fast forwarding through all of them. Now, our image of the day, and it's actually based on some breaking news that only came through a couple of hours ago. And in fact, team, I know that you're all very exercised about it because you were all discussing it before we came on air. The 20-year-old who was filmed punching a 71-year-old woman 3 times in the head during the Posey Parker protest in Auckland last year. There he is there, boom, 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 3 hits to the head of a 71-year-old, has been granted a discharge without conviction and permanent name suppression. And his lawyer said the man was caught up in what she described as the frenzy of the protest. although actually the media had whipped up the frenzy before the visit of Posey Parker, and apparently the offender had suffered from ADHD, autism, had undertaken counselling, rehabilitation, 180 hours of community work. Police opposed the discharge without conviction, but incredibly, they didn't oppose a request for permanent name suppression. I mean, just look at that. That's a 20-year-old punching a 71-year-old 3 times in the head. She suffered concussion and bruising. She told the court that since the assault, she's been unable to go out and interact with people. She can't sleep without taking medication, and any noise caused her severe stress. She said the crime has had a huge impact on my general well-being. So a 20-year-old can punch a 70-year-old woman in the face 3 times, and in New Zealand you can get a discharge without conviction and a permanent name suppression, and apparently this is justice and protection for women. All I can say is, where's Marama Davidson now? Ashley, you're keen to find out some information on this, aren't you?
Oh, I'd love to know the guy's name. If anybody knows it, I'd seriously consider breaking the suppression order. So I don't know how easy it is to find.
Bruce, you're about 71. If someone punched you 3 times on the head, I think we'd be expecting a at least a conviction, even if there wasn't imprisonment or something. But to be discharged without conviction and name suppression means basically, boom, it's gone, disappeared into thin air, and the victim wasn't too happy.
Contrast that too with what's happened with a couple of people who've been involved in anti-Hamas or against protests in support of Hamas in the last few weeks, who've been treated pretty shabbily by the police. There's clearly one side of justice and then another side.
Arte, sorry to spring this on you, but as a woman, what do you think of the justice system when it does this?
It's disgusting. People shouldn't get away with that kind of cruelty, and they should be thrown into jail.
Okay. Simon, Peter, any comment before we get into our topics?
All I'd say, Bob, is that there are moves afoot by the Free Speech Union to appeal the discharge without conviction. Jonathan Ayling has, in the last hour and a half or so, put out an email to all those on his database asking for money. He doesn't know exactly how they can go about it or how much it's going to cost, but they want people to donate to the cause.
Yeah.
Frankly, this is just beyond the pale, and Judge Kevin Glubb really has some questions to answer. Of course, as a district court judge, he will not answer the questions because nobody's going to be allowed to ask them. And therein lies one of the major issues in our justice system. But Kevin Glubb will, I'm sorry, just go down in the halls of judicial infamy for this decision. It is beyond belief. The excuses made for this young man just do not wash with me. Okay, he might not be the most mentally able of people, but I'm sorry, he's obviously physically able. And you've got to think of the victim. And once again, we have a perpetrator being preferred, the rights of the perpetrator being preferred over the rights of the victim.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that is just not right. And I hope that the FSU gets lots and lots of money and pursues its appeal vociferously.
And I think the victim actually said that she was offered $1,000 and said that nowhere covered some of the medical costs and what she has had to go through. In fact, I remember there was a child abuse case that we were horrified by the sentencing for that, and we actually wrote to the Crown Law Office asking them to appeal the decision, which I think they actually did. It was such an unfair decision. Simon, did you have any comment just before we move on to our topic?
3 really quick things. And you go, oh my God, 3. But one is to echo what Peter's just said, support the Free Speech Union in their attempt to appeal this. Secondly, there's always a difference between reasons of why something happened and excuses. And unfortunately, this judge has got the most basic element mixed up. The third is this is not justice. This is just a transaction. What it basically says is that young lunatic activists can go and punch women, but so long as they do a little bit of community service, throw a crumb of money their way, it's okay. as I say, that's transactional. That's not justice. This is a pathetic situation. And unfortunately, point 4, I've lied, former politician, this is not the first time. This is not the first time that these judges have made appalling decisions.
Okay. I'm just going to note that down. 8:12. Simon O'Connor finally told the truth. Okay. Shall we just check out a couple of comments that have just come in, because I'm sure you're keen to hear from them. Somebody called Rex Ardar says, Peter and Ashley are fine new recruits, articulate and intelligent. Ashley, Rex is a panellist next week, so good try, Rex. You want them to be nice to you.
He's not a very good judge of character, I've got to say.
I know. Glennie
he might
says,
be on Peter, but...
Glennie says, Lux and Seymour Peters, guys, step up and put the lad behind bars. Let this slide and they will continue to hit women. Chris Lee says, what a great bunch of people. And the reason he says what a great bunch of people is because he says it's my first time. So there we go. Right, let's get into it. First topic. New coalition government of National Act and New Zealand First was sworn in on 27th of November 2023, 98 days ago. So they got 2-3 days to complete their 100-day promises. The only problem with that is that those 100 days included Christmas, New Year and the summer break, along with Sundays when they were at church, of course. So how have they done so far? And so, panel, I'm going to come around and I'd like a mark out of 10, firstly, for things that you have liked, and then a mark out of 10. Give us a mark out of 10, and then I'll ask you things you have liked, and then I'll come around second time and ask you things that you haven't liked or are concerned about. So I will go in Brady Bunch order as it appears on the screen. So Bruce, you are first off. Firstly, what do you give them out of 10?
I gave them 6 out of 10. I liked the immediacy of how they started off their 100 days. It looked interesting. And it was contrary to what was going on before with the previous government. And that was encouraging. It was good to see the declared reform and that they were concentrating on a number of issues that were significant and important, although a lot of those haven't taken place yet. They still have to take place. So that's all I could say. It sounds as though I might be stronger on the other side, but that's what I like about them so far. I did like the most recent thing with Simeon Brown and his transport regulations and so on. I thought they were stepping in the right direction and needed.
Okay, well done. Ashley, out of 10, what'd you give them?
So assuming you're going to come back to us for the other stuff, you're just wanting a number at this stage, I would have given them a 10 out of 10.
Things you like. 10 out of 10.
Okay, so I would have given them a 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
I would have given them a 10 out of 10 the day that the coalition agreement was signed. I'd currently give them an 8.5. What I do like is the absolute night and day between the last 6 years or the 6 years prior to these guys being elected and the very clearly articulated plan of things that are actually going to happen, which is believable, and the heft and the intellect which appears to so far be behind that. But when you come back to what I don't like, there's a couple of reasons that scores slip just a little bit.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Actually, just while I'm with you, Ashley, have you got any confession or anything you want to say about Winston Peters and some of the things you might have said last year?
No, I haven't. I still hold the same views that I did last year. Having said that, I will say that I'm pleased that he's part of the coalition, because that coalition agreement that I just referred to, and I can't believe I'm saying this, that the Act of the New Zealand First additions to that, I can see you're writing it down. The Act of the New Zealand First additions to that coalition agreement actually made it a better document. But we'll see what happens over the next couple of years and see whether he can actually sustain 3 years.
Okay, we'll come back for the negatives. Ate, out of 10, what have you given them?
I give them 7. I'm pleased that they have seemed to work out some common goals together, and they're working together. I like that there's been the focus on cutting costs. I think it's very prudent and positive, especially after the disgusting, wasteful spending over the last 6 years of the previous Labour government. They have a tough job, and I am glad that Winston Peters is making good progress with some of the promises he made before, while he was campaigning. So, and of course, the media was saying that it was going to be unstable. But so far, of course, the media has proven to be false.
Okay. We'll come back to your negatives for the government shortly. Simon, actually, let me just show you a message that has just come through. It's come through from Joe. Great panel this evening. Wonderful to see Simon have missed hearing his common sense.
Is that your cousin, Simon?
Is that your wife? Oh,
Thanks,
okay.
Joe. That's right. The last 4 months I've spent calling people saying, hey, look, on March the 4th, I'm on a Straight Talk. Make sure you log in and say nice things.
And all three of them have.
Good attempt to distract me, Bob. I'd give them a 7. On the positive side, they've done what they say they're going to do, particularly when you think about 3 parties coming together. I think New Zealand First has actually steeled, as in given strength, to that sort of traditional centre-right side of National. And again, the coalition's done what it said it's going to do, and it's repealed a lot of nonsense. So those are highlights. And echoing another panellist, a particular shout-out to Simeon Brown, who's just from day one hit the ground with announcement after announcement. So kudos to him.
Okay, and Peter, I just need to show you this comment that has come from Susan. She's a little bit concerned. She says, wowzers, Peter is a Highlanders fan. I think Susan might need to go to Specsavers, actually, because that's an Aussie jersey, isn't it?
No, it is the Highlanders. Maybe you need to go to Specsavers, Bob.
No, I was trying to wind you up as being an Aussie. Okay, well done. Do you want to make any apology for being a Highlanders fan, or...?
Well, I live in Otago, for heaven's sake, Bob. What's the problem? Of course I'm a Highlanders fan. I grew up in North Otago. I'm now living back in Central Otago. Okay. I went to primary school in Southland. It's Highlanders territory.
You can't get it out of the blood.
We're 1-1 this year. Very unlucky against the Blues at the weekend. So, no, they finished up losing by 10 points.
The Aucklanders.
They were just unlucky. Anyway,
Peter,
to the task at hand, this government, I'll give them a 6.5 so far. Good things. I like the way they've repealed 3 waters. I like the way they've done away or abolished the Maori Health Authority. I like the way that they've done away with the crazy and, I believe, unworkable resource management legislation that was passed under urgency in the term of the last government. And I like the way that they've got an expanded COVID inquiry. I'm still having real question marks about how widespread that inquiry is going to be. And I know we're probably getting into the second part of the question. Why are they asking the public for the terms of reference? Don't they have enough bureaucrats and brains amongst their political class to be able to set the terms of reference themselves? Anyway, so those are the good things I like, but frankly, only about a 6.5 in terms of stuff they've done, because they've done lots of repealing, lots of putting stuff off. I'm yet to see much, apart from the roads announcement this afternoon, I'm yet to see much in terms of what they intend to do in terms of their policy to replace what they've repealed.
Okay, round again. Bruce, things you haven't liked, or what are you concerned about?
Well, I have reservations, I guess, is probably more than a concern. I think that I'm not sure that the Prime Minister is bold enough to do what he wants to do and confident enough to do what he wants to do. He's had to contend with criticism, in fact, wall-to-wall criticism from television, from both channels, and from radio. And I would like to see him follow through. And I wonder if he really does have a conservative mind that's strong enough to do that. Now, he might like to have a look at Argentina, of all places. Xavier Milei has reduced the state payroll and scrapped hundreds of regulations. He's cut government funding and expenditure and chopped the public service. And it's working. His reforms have led to the first budget surplus in Argentina for 20 years. But he still continues to fight an entrenched socialist and regulation mentality, which, of course, is what the Prime Minister is confronting here as well. And I think maybe one of the most obvious ways that places where that's been evident has been the condemnation on the smoke-free legislation has been wall-to-wall. There's been no mention, for example, of the duty on tobacco smuggling. In 2017, that was 4 million loss, and in 2022, 30 million. So the idea that somehow or other that the legislation was working, and the kind of righteous indignation that condemned the government's proposed legislation, I don't think was justified.
Okay, we will come back a little bit more to the media further in our topics. Ashley, what didn't you like? What did you give it? A 6.5. So
I gave it an 8.5.
8.5,
would have been 10 on the day of the coalition agreement, and I can't believe I'm actually cast on the role of defender given the other scores. However, so if I look at what's happened since the coalition agreement was signed, I mean, I take Peter's point about some of the things that they have done, but I disagree with them over the repeal stuff, because I actually believe that the repeal, essentially the stuff that they said that they were going to repeal or not do, was actually as important to the people who voted for them as the stuff that they're proposing to do. So I actually think I give that stuff a really big tick, because I think that that's basically saying to the public, hey, we said we were going to stop these things and we're doing it, and they're doing that within that 100 days. Having said that, the reason that the scores slipped a little bit for me, and it's particularly in relation to Peters, my mate Peters, and that's because some of the stuff that that New Zealand first put into the coalition agreement, which, and I can't believe I'm saying this, I actually think improved that agreement. For me, that's a declaration about what you're going to do going forward. And I already, just in the short space of time these guys have been in power, I already get the sense that that's slipping a little bit, and that Peter's determination to take a stand against some of the stuff that's in the agreement isn't there to the extent that it was even 2 months ago. So it might be wrong. You know, they've got almost 3 years ahead of them, and they may well plough through all of this stuff. But look, and I don't want to sound like I'm being ambivalent, but the flip side to that is, for goodness sake, these guys have been in for power for 5 minutes. We've just been through 6 years of the worst, most incompetent, ridiculous government that we've had in the history of this country, with the possible exception of Muldoon's era. These guys have been in power for 5 minutes. Let's give them a little bit of credit for what they've done, and let's see what they can do in the first year.
Okay. Ate, what haven't you liked? What are you concerned about?
I'm really concerned about Luxon putting Jacinda into this Christchurch thing that they're wanting to push, because it's about free speech. I can't understand how, Luxon is national, are recruiting Jacinda, who have destroyed the country, and Labour have destroyed the country in the last 6 years. So as far as I'm concerned, Jacinda has no place and no contribution for a positive New Zealand. So I'm really concerned about that. And the other thing is that as Bruce had mentioned, I don't see the courage of Luxon coming through. He's supposedly conservative, but it doesn't look like it now. I don't know who he's greasing up. The whole area of free speech is important, and the conservative values like abortion, those the trans. I'm just very concerned about that.
Okay, Simon, what haven't you liked so far?
Well, I think sort of echoing a little bit of what Ashley was saying, it's exceptionally early days. But I suppose where my nervousness comes in a little bit, affecting that ranking, is where's some of the actual policies. Having been in the Parliament beforehand, there's been lots of discussions amongst my now former colleagues what we want to do. So I'd actually like to see some of that coming through. I'd like to see them stand up a little bit more robustly against media. We've seen that over the last week with discussions around the Prime Minister and entitlements. I won't say too much on that. It's not to presume, but I know Peter's written a really good Substack on that. I'm a little unhappy about walking a few things back. They came out really strongly, for example, in support of AUKUS and Israel. Separate topics, but then just slowly walking them back, and I don't like that. I don't like that sort of thing. If you're going to say something, stick to it. There's a few other little tweaks, but overall, it's early days. But fundamentally, they've got to stand up to media who are vociferous in attacking this government, and they've got to hold their strength. Otherwise, they won't be able to implement what they actually are seeking to do.
Okay. Peter, what haven't you liked?
Well, the fact that they've broken a couple of election promises regarding taxes. Nicola Willis has said they're going to, after all, keep the 39% rate on trusts for trusts that make more than $180,000 a year. They specifically said during the election campaign that 39% rate on trusts would go. They also said the app tax, the tax that means that people who want to book an Airbnb for a weekend have to pay an extra 15% now. The National Party, Nicola Willis, during the election campaign said that they would be rescinding that tax, but they're going to push ahead with it. I'm sorry, that's just walking back election campaign promises. And we know what happened to Jim Bolger in the early 1990s. When that happened, we got MMP because he kept on breaking his promises. The other thing I really want to know is, what on earth did Christopher Luxon think he would achieve by going to the big gay out? And what was Nicola Willis trying to prove with that ludicrous, that horrible, ugly rainbow skirt? I mean, dear me, do you really think they're going to get any votes from that community? Just give me a break and, play your game, be real, which is what the ACT Party did. Sorry, that's what the New Zealand First Party did. The ACT Party went out there as well, didn't they? New Zealand First knew full well there was nothing to be gained. They stayed away. Nobody made any comment about it.
Yeah, interestingly, the Labour Party actually announced that they're doing a petition to get rid of, to stop relationship sexuality education being changed and improved. And they don't seem to put a total. I actually signed the petition just so I could monitor it. And for some reason, they're not telling anybody how many they've had signed, which is always a suggestion that things aren't going too well. Just the other point that I just want to ask is the media being a bit scurrilous and misrepresenting some of the actions of the government? I mean, the example that I caught up with somebody around and we were talking about the smoke-free legislation, and there was a poll on TV where they said, okay, National wants to do away with certain areas of selling and the amount of tobacco in a cigarette, and then they said, do you agree with the government doing away with smoke-free legislation? Now, to a person, it sounds like, oh, they're doing away with it completely. It's a free-for-all again, which is not. So it's actually misleading. And I'm wondering if there's other examples. Now, Bruce, you actually alluded to that because you talked about the smoke-free legislation. And in fact, I think ASH, which is what's that stand for? It's a group against smoking. They actually said that some of the proposals put in by the Labor government weren't going to be that effective anyway. So, Bruce, do you think the media is sort of being a bit scurrilous here and misrepresenting what the government's doing?
Well, it is. It is. Certainly on that issue of the tobacco, because it oversimplifies what's really going on, and this oversimplification misleads, and you get the kind of response that you were mentioning a little minute ago. I wish I could remember in order to punish myself, I knew I was going on tonight, and I thought I'd better watch the Channel 1 News. And there was something on it that convinced me that the process is just the same they were doing. But alas, being an octogenarian, it slipped my little mind what it was.
Okay, I'll write it down on a piece of paper next time. I'm sure it wasn't worth remembering.
Next time. But it's
can I give you?
Let me give you one example of the sort of thing that the media does. It always calls Palestine in the Israeli situation. It always calls Palestine and Samaria occupied territory, or it will talk about the country of Palestine. Well, both of those are nonsense, and it's that kind of thing that keeps turning up all the time certainly on both channels, really. But I can only remember it on Channel 1. So there's no doubt that they are overwhelmingly have one particular way of looking at the political scene. And tonight, I remember, it comes.
Well done.
The reporting on what's going on in Gaza is overwhelmingly about the suffering of the Gazans, and that the lack of the decision that's coming up on getting a ceasefire coming up is really being stopped is really the fault of the Israelis, when in fact the Hamas has said that they won't give the number of or the names of the prisoners they're going to release. And so they expect...
They won't tell them who's still alive. They won't tell them which ones are alive.
Yeah, won't tell them which ones are alive.
Terrible.
So you get... I don't know. I think there's enough there.
Okay. Yeah, we're morphing into a number of topics. That's okay. Yeah, go, Ashley.
Can I give you an analogy here of what's actually currently happening? So the first thing to note is that the contrast between the day before the election and the day after in respect of the media's treatment of the government was stark. And I think anybody who's got a brain's actually noticed it. So we've gone from, treating a previous Prime Minister with qualities of near sainthood through to attacking the government for everything that it does. But can I tell you a little story which illustrates it? It's a joke that most of you will know about Muldoon in the 80s. And Muldoon was so upset that the media wasn't treating him well that he got the entire media entourage down to Oriental Bay in Wellington. And he said, watch this. And he walked out across the water and he walked around the Oriental Bay fountain and back onto the shore. And he said, print that. And the following day, the headline said, Muldoon can't swim. And that's a really, really good example. That's a really good example of what's happening right now. It doesn't seem to matter what these guys do. The media are looking for the tiny little flaw as they see it in policy. Today's announcement about transport was a great example. Instead of focusing on probably the biggest commitment to transport policies of the last 20 years, what did they do? They focused on the fact that there's going to be an increase in petrol costs to part fund this. It's an incessant onslaught which is designed at doing everything that the media can to bring these guys down.
Okay, I just noted down 8:32. Ashley told a really good joke. Ate, are you concerned about the media being a bit scurrilous in the way they're representing what the government's doing?
The media, of course, the main thing is to divide us and to make money out of that. So, I think if people need to learn to discern and analytically, listen to what is being fed to them. Unfortunately, some people just think that what the media is telling the truth, but the truth in the media does not. It's an oxymoron.
Okay, and I mean, obviously, I've done a couple of blogs on just how the media are campaigning against any changes to RSE. They sort of seem to pick a couple of days and then they all just start closing in on it and they're asking questions. It's just full bore, and so that's one that I'm watching very closely to see whether that policy promise comes through. Simon, you've been the victim of this misrepresentation for way too long, 12 years. Is it any surprise that there's this kind of misrepresentation and not allowing the government to have time to do stuff? Oh, Simon, you may have put yourself on mute. There we are. We got you.
There we go. We're not even on Zoom and we're saying you're on mute. Look, I'm not surprised. And I don't think we should be. I mean, by and large, and it's a general comment because, look, there still are very good journalists and reporters there. But overall, they lean very heavily to the left. They ascribe to neo-colonial Marxist progressive mindset. So we shouldn't be surprised. In fact, we should really be taking a lesson from what we're seeing is they're basically, by attacking the current government, telling us they agreed with everything in the previous government. And they are misrepresenting by absence a lot of what's occurring. So is the government repealing elements of the smoke-free legislation? Well, yes, it is, but not in its entirety. Go and read the details. Same with RSE in schools, same as history in schools, you name it. They are making changes, but if you followed the media, you would think it's a wholesale destruction, which it is not. But I come back to my original point. It just affirms and confirms where the media sit, which was Labor, perfect, current government, wrong.
Yeah, and I've done a number of public polls, and many of them have been published. And when I saw that polling that One News did, where they said, okay, the government is changing some aspects of the smoke-free legislation. Do you agree or oppose doing away with anti-smoke smoke-free legislation. I thought, how did that question ever get past the auditors to ask a misleading question like that? And everybody would say, no, we shouldn't do away with the smoke-free legislation, but it's changing the tactic. Peter, is this any surprise to you that there's kind of this scurrilous stuff going on?
No surprise at all, really. Things have changed considerably inside that TV1 newsroom in the 5 years or so that I've been away from there. You used the phrase before about the smoke-free legislation, Bob, some aspects of. I thought the question said straight out, the government is planning to change the smoke-free or drop the smoke-free legislation. Do you agree with that? An absolutely leading question with completely wrong information in it. Let's not also forget that during that entire debate regarding Casey Costello and her supposed support for dropping excise taxes on tobacco, she increased them by, 4.5% or 5%. On January the 1st, there was a cabinet paper to that effect, and the scheduled increase duly went through. Not once was that reported. So I just throw up my hands in horror. It's a bit like, Friday a week ago, a report on the defacing of some Captain Cook statues, I think in Christchurch. And Captain Cook, for heaven's sake, was referred to as a British coloniser. He's one of the greatest explorers in the history of mankind. And if it wasn't for Captain Cook, so many of us would not be here today. He was not a coloniser. He had nothing to do with the subsequent settlement. All he did was map and land on the place, and really had the first British contact with this country. To describe him as a coloniser is just plain wrong. Yet somehow that got past a sub-editor, got past a producer in that newsroom. And I tell you what, I used to get a lot of people upset and annoyed when I was in that newsroom, because I would look at reporter scripts before they went to air, and I would make comment about things like that, and I would have arguments with people about things like that. Perhaps it's not surprising they got rid of me.
All right, let's move on. The owners, and it's a similar topic and maybe answers what we've been talking about in terms of the consequences. The owners of the television station 3 plan to close the news service, Newshub. It comes amid a technical recession in New Zealand, and the local arm of Warner Brothers Discovery, which own it, reported a $32 million loss last year. And Warner Brothers Discovery executive James Gibbons said there was no single trigger that caused this. Rather, it was a combination of negative events in New Zealand and globally. And so most of you will be aware of this image, and that is all closing up. Now, Dr. Bryce Edwards from the Democracy Project, he said this: democracy is the loser whenever a major media company disappears. We've seen a total consensus about this in the last 2 days. Politicians, academics and journalists have commented on the demise of Newshub, pointing out that a reduction in journalists reporting on and investigating current affairs and politics does not serve the democratic goal of an informed public. And of course, I'm just riling you all up before you comment, and I'm going to come to you first, Peter. I'm going to go in reverse order. I can see your blood pressure going up already. There was the Public Interest Journalism Fund, and just to really have some fun, here is Jacinda explaining the fund.
In New Zealand, we saw that COVID-19 was affecting traditional media models, already under pressure from rapid changes in technology and consumer demand. We've also seen the spread of misinformation on COVID-19, particularly through social media. We had to act, so we made it a priority to establish a public interest journalism fund to help our media continue to produce stories that keep New Zealanders informed. Underpinning this action is a recognition that a vibrant and trusted media sector is a vital component of a healthy democracy. This is what Building Back Better is all about.
Lovely, lovely. Ate, behave. Remember, this is a G-rated show. Now, Winston Peters called this bribery. Trust in the media has plummeted to 42%, according to an AUT study of trends. So, Peter, did Newshub fail because it went woke, because it needs a decent accountant? Is it a broken model, or are Kiwis just turning off mainstream media, or is it just the start of the crumbling of the whole industry?
Well, it's a combination of all of the above, Bob. Go woke, go broke. Yeah, I mean, to say that the closing down of Newshub is not good for a democracy because it means less of a plurality of voices, that's poppycock, because there is no plurality of voices in the New Zealand media. They're all singing from the same song sheet. So all Newshub was doing was essentially singing the same tune with pretty much the same lyrics as TVNZ, Radio New Zealand, and the newspapers. As I mentioned in the Substack that I wrote last week, did at any stage the executives of Newshub think that maybe if we presented a different view of the world, we might attract more viewers? I don't think that was ever considered, because the philosophy and the thinking of those running the Newshub newsroom, and one hates to be misogynistic here, but it was a newsroom, like many are, dominated by women. The head of news, Sarah Bristow, the political editor, Tova O'Brien, her offsider, Jenna Lynch. Melanie Jones was another senior executive there until recently. With Jacinda Ardern in power, there was no way that there could ever be any change of thinking about the way of the world. So for them to adopt a slightly more conservative approach to reporting the affairs of the world, to start really pushing back against the Labour government, was just never an issue. And in terms of what the National Party is doing, well, it was just a continuation, obviously, of continuing the fight against the national government in favour of what had gone beforehand. It's as if they didn't expect a change of government. It's as if they didn't recognise the legitimacy of last year's election. So that was just one part of it. The fact that Newshub is closed down is really a reflection on the appalling performance of TV3 as a business for most of the last 35 years. I remember it's been in receivership twice. The only time it's been remotely successful was during the Canadian ownership, when some Canadian media conglomerate, CanWest, had the shareholding and had the ownership. When they sold out to private equity, it's been all downhill. There's been some absolutely disastrous ownership in recent times. The company was going bust. The newsroom was a major cost centre. It had to go. And frankly, I'm not shedding any tears for it. I'm sorry for the people who'll lose their jobs. Yeah. The good ones will get other jobs. But really, who would work in the mainstream media anymore anyway? In many respects, I'm glad that, in fact, I'm very thankful that I was of the generation which worked there during the golden era of television news, because it's certainly not going to come again.
Okay, Simon, I'm sure you were gutted because you've had a wonderful relationship with Newshub, who have been completely fair and honest with you.
Well, the irony aside, I'm not actually a particularly bitter or resentful person, so I'm not motivated from that. But, look, I'm probably going to echo a lot of what Peter's said. I mean, it's a business which has struggled from day one financially. And so, particularly on that point, I'm struck in recent days, and news this morning, it was Guy on Esplanade talking about, the government knew that this could be going under at the start of the year. There was advice from the ministry they should have been funded. It's a private entity, for goodness sake. Why is it that government has to come barreling in to save or protect any private business, for that matter, let alone media, which obviously touches on your public interest journalist fund, which has been exceptionally good from Jacinda's side of undermining faith in the media. But the big point, seems everyone's doing Substacks these days. When I wrote one recently, there is, again, no plurality. There is no diversity. So I've got a lot of time for Dr. Bryce Edwards. I actually really like a lot of what he writes. But it's very academic. Yeah, you want a fourth estate of media which is broad. We don't have that in New Zealand, not in mainstream. And so there's no real change to the democratic settings or even the media settings in New Zealand with Newshub going at all. You're not going to miss any perspectives that you're not already going to pick up on Radio New Zealand or TVNZ. But the little lining of hope is actually, and not to put wind into your sails, Bob, but actually things like StraightTalk, doesn't matter if it's Reality Check Radio, the platform work that Brendan Malone's doing, and many, many, many others across New Zealand are actually engaging into media. We're finding it in different places, and people are slowly stepping up. So I think we're seeing a liminal moment here, a changing moment. So I'm not too upset or worried, other than, again, if I might echo what Peter was saying, there are individuals there, and you've got to actually feel sorry for them, and for a lot of them actually having to play out in front of the media itself. That's not particularly pleasant. But step back from the individuals. Newshub, doesn't really matter that they're going. I don't think we'll see any difference.
Okay, Ate, what do you think?
Oh, I agree with Peter and Simon. I mean, to me, I think it's a good day for Newshub to go away, because just been so much left-leaning lies over the last 6 years, and especially over during the pandemic. Labour government funded and tried to rescue the media with strings attached, as many of us remember, just into the Prime Minister's briefings, where no one else allowed to ask questions except Tova and Jessica Law. And I've talked to many conservative journalists, and they just said, "Oh, we agree with you, but we're just too scared to say anything contrary." So that's a sick environment, because as all of us know, bedrock of good media is being independent and to report the truth. I think from the health perspective, so much money was poured into the media to say whatever Jacinda and Chris Hipkins wanted to say. The money that was promised to health workers, the midwives who are burned out, nurses who've left the country, people are waiting over 6 weeks, up to 2 months to see a GP. The health system is in trouble, and some money could have gone to them instead of just pouring it into the media to say the narrative. And to me, that is sick. I think it's a good opportunity with this media leaving, that good journalists will step up, because as Simon have said, and then just for the new generation of young people to be able to think critically and analyze the rubbish that is being shoved down their throat. So good riddance to Newshub and TV3. Thank you.
Okay, no sympathy there. Ashley, any sympathy?
Yes and no. So no, in the sense that I don't doubt James Gibbons from Warner Brother Discovery when he says that a big factor in this was loss of advertising revenue. I'm sure that's true, and fragmentation of media and all that other stuff that we've talked about. But I take Peter's point and Simon's and Ate's point that there's no loss to the current landscape as a result of the loss of Newshub, because they were, if this thing's represented by a choir, they were one of the backup singers singing the same song as everybody else. So we're not going to, there's no lack of voice or one less voice in the media, because it's just the same voice coming from a different format. But the reason I've maybe got a slightly different view to everybody else is that there was an opportunity, and if Newshub had read the room and seen what happened after the election, they might have actually come to this conclusion themselves. But there was and remains an opportunity for a mainstream TV channel that covers issues from a conservative bent. So if you like a sort of a Fox Light, and that doesn't exist in New Zealand, but there's a real space in the New Zealand media market for that. And it's a shame, because once this goes, it's very unlikely that another operator will come in and operate a news service in New Zealand in any form under the current model. They might under some new model going forward, but under the current model that we've been used to, where you've got your main news at 6 p.m, that'll be gone. There'll be one, and that'll be it for some period of time. So that part of it, I think, is actually a real loss, and it's a pity, as I say, that Newshub didn't read the room, didn't actually have a look at what was going on in the country and determine that maybe there was a market opportunity that they were missing, instead of this slavish adherence to an ideology that seems to have dominated not just Newshub, but pretty much every other mainstream media organisation in this country. And, Stuff will be next for the same reasons. In fact, anything that's not government funded, if it's not very, very careful and doesn't take some cognizance of its audience, is going to go down the same path.
Okay. And finally, Bruce. Bruce, did you go to school with Philip Sherry? It will only be the oldies amongst the room that will know who I'm referring to there when I say Philip Sherry. You'll know,
whether
Peter.
Bruce is frozen or he's thinking really carefully.
Has he frozen? Have we lost Bruce?
Oh, no, he's back.
Oh, there he is.
Saw him move.
Bruce, are you there?
He's frozen again.
Yes, the Bruce. Papa B. No, my kids call him Papa B because they love him so much. Okay, we'll come back to Bruce. Let's just check a couple of these messages that have come through and excuse the names. From Sunny Side Up, interesting. People have really interesting names on YouTube. Sunny Side Up. The only people mourning the loss of Newshub is the media. They're in their own world. Actually, I think there's some truth to that, actually. Yeah. Sweet FA says, nice work, Jim. Fantastic crew tonight. Yeah. Jim, nice work. I don't know who Jim is, actually. Right. Iris says, so many people stopped watching years ago. Some saw how ideologically radicalised they had become after the Posey Parker story. When she pulled up her zip and Newshub tried to make out as though she was making a terrorist sign. And in fact, all she was doing was pulling up her zip. Charmaine says, actually, I thought this was quite funny. iViews had better repent now. I think she means One News, but she calls it, is it One Views or iViews? I thought that was quite clever. Chris Lee says, married at first sight doesn't count as Newshub. Yeah, amazes me that they think that's a news item. And Charmaine, just back to the smoking thing, she says, I want the government to stop cigarettes and sales from vape sales from dairies and petrol stations. That will stop a lot of the thefts and ram raids and dissuade the addicted. All right, just before we go on to our next topic, just very quickly, speaking of news and where are you going to source your information from and how do you fact check what the media is presenting? Family First has actually got a new feature coming up. Here's an introduction to it.
Hi, I'm Tambi Stowers and I want to tell you today about a new Family First feature program starting very soon that I will be presenting. It's called Pulse Point. As more and more families turn away from mainstream media sites, we want to fill that gap and put the spotlight on the latest news items and research that you need to be aware of. In other words, we'll watch the news so that you don't have to. We'll cut through the spin and uncover the real issues. We'll be a trusted source of the latest news and research affecting families and social conservatives, covering politics, family, life issues, faith and religious freedom, both here and overseas. Now, each episode of the Pulse Point will cover the news or research that the mainstream media has ignored, but which you need to know about. And of course, these tend to be socio-conservative issues that they ignore or misrepresent. But we will also check the news that the mainstream media has reported, which needs to be fact-checked or needs a counter view included to make it more balanced. You know what we mean. We really hope that Pulse Point will become a trusted and credible source of news for you and your family. The Family First team are looking forward to researching and reporting stories that really matter to all of us. It will be more than just headlines. So watch out for your regular episodes of Pulse Point with me, Tambi Stowers, and available to watch on our website, Facebook, Twitter, and on our YouTube channel. See you soon.
All right, so something to watch out for, and fact-checking the mainstream media news is a key one. In fact, there was a story today about euthanasia on the Stuff website, once again pushing the possibility of expanding the law to allow euthanasia for children. This is a New Zealand case, and once again, it's a one-sided story marketing a law change, but giving absolutely no alternative viewpoint and what are the concerns about it. So that's the type of stuff we have to cover. Okay, team, we've got what have we got? We've got 6 minutes left. Courier Market Research Company, and we seem to be sticking on the theme of media tonight, and they asked this question. So it was a nationwide poll, and they said this: do you think the New Zealand media overall are biased towards the right, biased towards the left, or not biased? Now, probably if I did that poll amongst the panellists, we'd all say it's biased towards the left. But as you can see there, 37% said it was biased towards the left, so that's about a third. only 12% said biased towards the right, and unbelievably 31% thought it wasn't biased. And then they broke down the results, and they then asked, of those who said no bias, 18% were national voters, 12% were ACT voters, but the biggest group of people who think there's no bias is Labour voters and Green voters. So either the left think there's no bias, or they don't, or they think it's biased towards the right. I mean, Bruce, let's start with you. I'll go in the opposite direction. Is there any surprise about this result? I mean, for me personally, I was surprised that there was still a reasonable level of people who thought that our media was biased towards the right or wasn't biased. What am I missing? Oh, he's gone. He's okay. Bruce has checked out. We'll come back to him if we can. Ashley, are you surprised by the result?
By those no, not well. Only to the extent that I thought that the bias toward the left result would have been even higher, because it's so obvious to anybody who actually looks at it. Interestingly, it would be interesting if you went through those who said that it wasn't biased to actually analyse how they consume media. And whether that question actually asked if they were regular consumers, because I suspect some of them weren't, and therefore that result's based on the fact that they didn't actually know. For me, there's a really clear bias. That bias has got worse over the last 2 or 3 years since Ardern's leadership, and again, it comes back to the point that I made earlier. If the media were reading the room, they would recognise a market opportunity in those results, but there's an ideological overlay to this thing that means that this stuff's not going to stop.
Okay, Simon, I'll shuffle it around a little bit. Simon, are you surprised that so many people think that either it's biased towards the right or it's not biased?
On that first set of... sorry, now I'm paranoid that I've got my microphone still on silent.
Yeah, no, it's on.
I was surprised at the first set of numbers. I was expecting it to be higher, but then when you broke it down by party, it really just tells the full story, that of course those who are consuming happily from the left will be happy with what they are receiving. But I want to make 2 points. In some ways, and I'm not trying to be hedging bets here, it's not even just about bias, it's just that you don't get both sides of the story. It's just that a whole series of New Zealanders, sections of society, are effectively censored. Sir Roger Scruton, he's a wonderful but now dead, the good ones are, British philosopher, talked about the censorship of the conservative or the censorship of the right, and that's what happens here. And you just illustrated it with that euthanasia story today, and we could rattle off a whole series of stories over the last few weeks, months, years, where you just don't get the other side. So I'm probably splitting hairs here, but you have bias at one level, but I think there's a much, much deeper problem in New Zealand media, is that there's just a whole range of topics which are not fully explored. The last point to make, which I think backs up your data, is look at the obsessive nature of many in mainstream media for attacking other newer media outlets. It's phenomenal. They are threatened by anyone else having a different opinion, and they are so quick to degrade them and label them, which I think is incredibly telling, again, of how biased or how censorious they are.
Yeah, Peter, I mean, I would imagine that we would all like, wrong graph, we would all like that third one down, not biased, to be 100%. And that's the thing that I don't understand about the media, and maybe you can help me out, Peter, is that they've been sent a clear warning that people think they are biased, that they have been bribed by funds from the government, that they've shown this lack of independence and we want more balance. And yet rather than saying, okay, we are balanced and proving it by being balanced, they seem to be just holding their nose and going down no matter what. I mean, are they just not reading the room, or are they in their own little bubble?
I think they're in their own little bubble, frankly. The media, the nationwide mainstream media is Auckland and Wellington based. Sure, they have regional newsrooms, but there's not a lot of commentary or voices coming from what you might call the heartland, the hinterland, the provinces. Let's not also forget the impact of education in the last, 25 years. I mean, there are journalists now in their late 40s and early 50s who went to school in the 90s. They were at university and at journalism training institutions at the beginning of the century. start of the new millennium. And that's when, shall we say, the indoctrination, the new way of teaching journalism began. I think it's been mentioned many times in recent days since the Newshub closure was announced that, in days gone by, people became journalists, people started working in the media just by either leaving school, having a bit of a knockabout life and then sort of falling into the media, or such as in my case, leaving school, not going near a tertiary institution, being lucky enough to be taken on as a copy boy and tea boy at a local radio station, and just learning the ropes, learning about music programming, hanging about a newsroom, and just sort of picking it up on the go, sort of like an apprenticeship. Nobody specifically mentored me or told me how to do it, but you just picked it up because you got the atmosphere, you got the sniff, you got the feel of the place. And everybody made a point of ensuring that both sides of the story were told. If one particular political action was in the wind, it was just a natural thing for a journalist to do, to ring up the other side to get their point of view. So there was always two sides of the story told. For whatever reason, the new way of journalism instruction, journalism education doesn't bother with that now. It's all about how you can get out and change the world and be a political activist. And I think we're seeing the fruit of that long march through the institutions coming to fruition now. And then on top of those journalism training institutions, you've got the secondary school and for that matter, the primary school indoctrination and way of instruction beginning to show its face as well. So I don't think there's any immediate possibility of the media changing its direction, frankly, because of that level of training and background of the people in positions of power. Yeah.
Okay, interesting break you had. My big break was being the Friday night DJ at Glen Innes Ice Skating Rink. And anybody who lives in Auckland will know the Glen Innes Ice Skating Rink. So that was my big break. Ate, you have the final say here. Are you surprised that some people think the media are actually right-wing biased or not biased?
I agree with what Peter was just saying. The media is very biased, as all of us have said tonight. The polling question is problematic because if you ask 5 different people what comes to mind, whether it's left or right, you get 5 different answers. For example, if there are people who think that the right is awful, they want to be richer and they take money for the poor. But if you say to them, what about in the last government or the last 4 years, you have unemployed people who just go to sleep and the taxpayer pay $280 a night and feed them. And, they think that it's absolutely wasteful spending. So they change their mind. For example, what Kellen Clark and what they're pushing with the marijuana, people don't know the truth, is that you can access medicinal cannabis from any doctor prescription. So people do not know the truth because the media coverage lacks content deliberately. And for example, is like this Hamas terrorist attack on Israel. You never hear the media saying that Hamas is a terrorist organization. You never hear them telling the truth that they're hating the Jews. There's no two-state solution because you can't live with your enemy who wants to kill you. And Hamas say that they want to kill the Jews, and so you never hear that. So no wonder why people are just so confused. But I think the solution is tell the truth, stop the spin, stop the lying. And I think we just need to help our young people so that they're not chanting from the river to the sea, kill all the Jews. I imagine, Pākehās who've come to this Aotearoa, imagine you teaching your kids, kill the Māori, hate the children, or Chinese who infiltrating Pacific, the Chinese saying, kill the Tongans in our own land. But that's what the media are doing. They're not telling the truth. Thanks.
Great.
Okay, well done, team. Right, we are out of time, and next week, believe it or not, we have almost a new panelist, a panel group. Simon, you're back. Sorry about that. You got 2 weeks in a row, but we've got Brendan Malone, Sue Reed, and we've actually got two newbies coming, which is Rodney Hyde and Emeritus Professor Rex Adar. So, I'm going to have to bring my Rojo Thesaurus for Rex because he'll use some big words on me. And good news, team, Ala Pomalele will return in a couple of weeks. She's now a new mum to little Samuel and is doing very well. We saw her today at staff meeting. So that is it. Thank you, team, for a fantastic job. Bruce is still playing that game, Don't Blink First, and I think he has won by miles. But Simon...
I thought he was emulating Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, he's just frozen mid-sentence. Simon and Peter, thank you. You did a superlative job. And Ashley, nice to have you back. Ate, as always. And to our viewers, thank you for our first one of the year. Yeah, I know, we've been a bit rusty. The Cis White Mail's still warming up, but we will be back next week. Have a great week. See you next week at 8 o'clock.